what is UK RoHS? Well, UK RoHS is actually a statutory instrument that was put in place by the United Kingdom, and it's SI 2012-3032. The title is the Restriction of the Use of Certain Hazardous Substances in Electrical and Electronic Equipment. And the regulations were published in 2012 and have been amended many times. Now, this regulation is actually a national implementation of the EU RoHS directive in the EU. So understanding the EU compliance system is important to understand where this regulation actually originally came from. So when we place a product on the market in the European Union, which the United Kingdom was a member of until the end of last year, you need to meet all the requirements of the CE mark, place a CE mark on your product, and then you can place it on the market. Now, for every product has different regulations and directives which might apply that you need to comply with before you can go ahead and place a CE mark, issue your declaration of conformity, sell the product in Europe, or in the European Union, I should say. So in order to look at this, we need to take a look at what the difference is between an EU regulation versus an EU directive. So an EU regulation is a binding legislative act that applies to all member states. So basically the Parliament and Commission, they issue this regulation and it's in effect across all member states without any other legislative actions required. Examples of this are the personal protection equipment regulation and medical device regulation. There are others as well. Now, when we get into an EU directive, we're talking about a legislative act which sets goals, which the member states then must incorporate into their own national laws. And so there's a difference between a regulation and a directive. And the EU RoHS requirements within the EU CE marking scheme is a RoHS directive. It's a CE marking directive. So once that directive was published by the European Commission, then the member states were required to implement that into their national laws, which is exactly what the United Kingdom did when they created the UK RoHS regulations, right? And this was their national implementation of the EU RoHS directive. Now notice that the arrows point both directions because when this law was enacted, the national legislation had hooks back into the original directive. For example, for exemptions, it would simply reference the European RoHS directives, annexes 3 and 4, to determine what exemptions apply per UK RoHS, right? So there was some kind of permanent connection between the national law and the EU directive. So that way, as the EU directive is maintained, that flows directly to the UK requirements. Now, this is something that is not just unique to RoHS. All the different kinds of directives that are applicable needed this to happen. So for example, when the EU Electromagnetic Compatibility Directive was published, before that came into effect, it was implemented in the national laws by the creation of the United Kingdom's EMC regulations, right? So the RoHS, EMC, Radio Equipment Directive, these all have national legislations that are tied to them for every member state. What happened though, is that as I think all of us are aware of, back in June of 2016, the United Kingdom voted to exit the European Union. That's affectionately known as Brexit. And on December 31st of last year, the United Kingdom formally completed its exit. And as of 11:01 p.m., December 31st, 2020, the United Kingdom was no longer a member of the European Union. This ended the incorporation of all future EU laws, regulations, and directives into UK law because they're no longer a member of the EU. As you can see, that broke those hooks between the UK RoHS regulation and the EU RoHS directive. So this means that amendments had to be applied within the UK legislative system to replace those ties to the European Union's legislation to ties to internal legislation within the UK. One of the things that happened was that the RoHS exemptions that were referenced to the EU document are no longer referenced. So the United Kingdom has decoupled the EU RoHS Annex 3 and Annex 4 exemption lists from their requirements. The other thing that happened here is because the CE marking is a European Union requirement, it's a scheme associated with placing product on the market in the European Union. The UK RoHS regulation after Brexit stopped supporting CE marking and started supporting the United Kingdom's new compliance mark, the UKCA, the United Kingdom Conformity Assessment Mark. That replaces CE marking for product being placed on the market in the UK. And so in order to meet our requirements for UKCA marking, we would have to comply with UK RoHS regulations in the same manner that in order to meet the CE marking requirements, we have to comply with the EU RoHS Directive.
Learn more by viewing the full-length video online at greensofttech.com/videos. Plus, learn about our environmental regulation solutions online at greensofttech.com.